Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today I come with sad news. I woke up this morning to a text from Rich Mitch actually, who said that Euro Rose had sent him an Instagram post from Nathalie Feisthauer saying that master perfumer Olivier Pescheux has died. And I was like, what? I mean, he seemed so young. I was like really shocked. And so I actually went and found Nathalie Feisthauer on Instagram and subscribed to her and, started following her or whatever and read the post myself. And sure enough, there was a release yesterday by Givaudan that basically issued a statement saying that Olivier Pescheux passed away in Paris, France, July 10th at the age of 57 after fighting a long disease. I know he had a wife and daughters who were still relatively young, so very sad to see. Apparently he was born in 1966. He graduated from the IPCA, the prestigious perfumery school, and started his career in 1990 as a perfumer. And so today's video is going to be dedicated to his life. It's unfortunate because I feel like I've been doing a lot of these lately. You know, we had one on Thierry Mugler. We had one on Paco Rabanne. We had one on Rosendu Matu recently, who had passed away. Issey Miyake passed away recently, although I did not do a video on him. And there's been a lot of these, rest in peace videos I feel like I've been doing lately, unfortunately. But yes, Olivier Pescheux definitely deserves the recognition, and I know that his, fragrances will continue to live on. So let's talk about, this is going to be a top 7 fragrances from my collection ranked list honoring his work, the fragrances I have in my collection that he is the perfumer of, and also a couple samples, which I'm going to be doing some videos on very soon as well. So let's get started. Let's do scent of the day as is honorary. And actually, I wasn't expecting to do another perfumer's portfolio video so soon, because yesterday I just did one on the great late Guy Robert, who passed away back in 2012, I believe. And so I'm wearing one of his creations in memory of him today. And then, of course, we got the news of Olivier Pescheux's passing. But this is Gucci Pour Homme, the original from 1976. And what a creation this is. This, I think this takes little tricks that he learned along the way. I think this takes little bits and pieces of some of his creations, like from Equipage to Dior Essence, and combines it all together to create something amazing. One of the better interpretations of, I would say, an aromatic, citrusy, masculine fragrance from the 70s. Many of these aromatic citrus style fragrances are just a little bit boring to me, especially if you go back even further in time. If you talk about things like Eau de Lanvin or Capucci Pour Homme or, Eau Sauvage, they're very boring to me, those type of fragrances. And it's unfortunate that this is discontinued, because this really sort of takes that style and adds a bunch of layers on top. It does very similar things for me to something like YSL Pour Homme, right? Very similar sort of structure, but this adds even more on top. There's a beautiful green basil, herbal basil in the opening, very old school with lavender, so it's very traditionally masculine. Going to the office dressed like this today, this fits absolutely perfectly in the office. It's citrusy, it's fresh, but it has this woody, slightly animalic, old school style animalic, not Coro style animalic or anything like that, but old school vintage masculine style animalic. But it's softened with a beautiful iris and woods. There's sandalwood and cedar, which play a dominant role, and there's this pepperiness to the fragrance. There's this sort of spiciness to the fragrance, if you will. I would probably call it like a citrusy, aromatic, woody, spicy fragrance that has a big old school oak mossy dry down. This is the oak moss that I'll tell you that. This is definitely the oak moss that And Guy Robert just absolutely knocked this out of the park. There is a little bit of amber and vanilla and tonka, just to keep everything a little bit, not sweet, but a little pleasing to the nose into the dry down. And most important to me, and one of the reasons why this is one of my favorite versions of that citrusy aromatic style, is the leathery labdanum dry down. you know, leather and labdanum are listed in the base, and you do sort of get both. You get this leatheriness and you get this sort of gumminess of the labdanum. It's really a beautiful composition, and sort of like this old school masculine fragrance that just works beautifully today in a sea of, you know, these boring fragrances that come out nowadays. Going back to something like this is really a joy and a pleasure. So, but I didn't get to enjoy this long because I heard the terrible news today. So let's talk about Olivier Pescheux's creation. So I just want to read the little, blurb that Givaudan CEO said about Olivier Pescheux's passing today. He said, "We are deeply saddened by the loss of Olivier Pescheux. He has not only been the architect of many of the most beautiful and iconic fragrances of the industry, but also an adored person dedicated to his art and committed to mentor the upcoming generation of perfumers." And there's some fragrances that he has done that I do not have in my collection. So for example, he was one of the 3 perfumers who made 1 million, which many people in the fragrance community, at least that get to the point that, you know, the addicts in the fragrance community, let's say, sort of thumb their nose at 1 million. It's a sweet, boring, you know, clubbing fragrance, if you will, that, you know, doesn't appeal to people like me. If you're into stuff like this, you won't like 1 million, okay? But it was a huge hit for Paco Rabanne. Remember, this is 2008, 1 million came out. He also did Mont Blanc Explorer, which is almost like Mont Blanc getting back at Creed, I guess you could say, for their original Santal sort of theft of Individual. And so they put out Explorer. I guess the way I've heard Explorer described, I don't think I've ever smelled Explorer, but the way I've heard it described is like a working man's Aventus, which I have so many bottles of the OG, I would just wear that. So you're not going to see Explorer, you're not going to see 1 million in this list, and you're not going to see the original Eros Eau de Parfum, which was a huge hit. Now, he wasn't involved in the original Eros EDT. That was different perfumers, but he did have a hand in making the Eau de Parfum version, which they released in 2020. And he also, this is a great segue into the first, let's say, honorary mention fragrance that I'm going to talk about here. And he had a hand in making the flanker. So in 2018, they actually released a peppery flanker of Eros called Eros Flame. And Eros Flame, I guess if you really twisted my arm and said, "Ramsey, you have to wear an Eros fragrance, pick one," I guess I would begrudgingly pick Eros Flame. It has a note of Chinotto, and apparently Chinotto is a very special type of bitter orange, and I think it's a very similar bitter orange used in 1 million as well. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not very familiar with 1 million. I do have a decant floating around somewhere, actually. Yeah, you know what? Why don't I just grab the little decant so I can show you guys. Because even though it's not my type of fragrance, it should be, I guess, honored in memory of Olivier Pescheux. But so yes, I do have a little 5 ml of 1 million here. So I mean, everyone I feel like knows the gold bar, one of the most iconic little bottles in recent memory. On the designer side, and this sold like hotcakes for Paco Rabanne. I also have a little sample here, so I guess I will do a video on 1 million one of these days, the original Eau de Toilette from 2008. And so he had a hand to play in that, and then he did, like I said, the flanker of Versace Eros Flame. And this, I think, is the best version of Eros that you're going to get. It has that this sort of orangey pepperiness in the opening that does give off this fiery, flamey type feel. The problem is the dry down for me falls into that sort of generic vanillic Tonka designer sweet thing that I absolutely despise. Although these type of fragrances sold very, very well. And, you know, there's a whole generation of men that associate masculine perfume with stuff like this. And so you have to give him a shout out for that. And then the one that probably I don't have in my collection that I would like to add that he's done, this is the one that's sort of top of the list for me. If I was going to add another Olivier Pescheux fragrance, I'll tell you right now, with no uncertain terms, it would be this. And this is Diptyque's Benjoin Boheme. Benjoin Boheme. And thank you, Armando, for this very generous decant. I've gotten to spray it a couple times. I really, really like this. This is a fantastic representation of what sort of this resinous benzoin, imagine like this bubbly sort of resin just bubbling up from the surface. Like imagine this maybe heat coming from the inner core of the earth, just heating up this gum-like resin and sort of bubbling up. And that's what it smells like to me. There's just this there's just this resinous, spicy warmth to this fragrance. Benzoin adds this beautiful warmth to a composition, almost like it's just been sitting under a under an open flame, you know. And really beautiful composition. I will do a video on this before this decant is finished, and maybe even you'll see a bottle in my collection at some point in the future. So that is Diptyque's Benjoin Boheme. Definitely one of the best benzoin fragrances I've smelled that I don't have in my collection. So those are the honorary mentions for Olivier Pescheux that you'll probably be hearing about at some point in the future. 1 Million, Versace Eros Flame, and Diptyque's Benjoin Boheme. That Diptyque is really hard to find for some reason. You don't see it very often, but yes, I do need to find myself a bottle. Okay, so let's get started on the top 7 that I actually do have full bottles of in the collection. Now again, these are ranked just based on my personal taste. I'm not saying 1's better than 2, I'm not saying 2's better than 3, so forth and so on. I feel like I have to say that every time because there's always someone who either gets offended by my rankings or whatever it may be, disagrees with how I put these. You know, this is just personal preference. It's kind of a fun way to do a video and honor Olivier Pescheux's memory at the same time. So number 7 for me is actually a fragrance that I think was sort of a big deal when it came out. It's a Dior. It's a Dior fragrance from 2001, and Olivier Pescheux actually did this fragrance with Olivier Guillotine, and this is called Dior's Higher. One of the few fragrances that still has a box sort of floating around. You can see the short ingredient list. This is an older bottle, and I don't know if Higher is still available for purchase. It might be, but they don't make it in this bottle anymore. This is what the original bottle looked like. Sort of this high-tech, modern, you know, built-in sprayer, Michael Jackson Scream music video type bottle. And Dior's Higher is, interestingly enough, a very fresh fragrance. And that's the reason that it's at number 7. It's not the fragrance composition, because actually I think it's a brilliant composition. It's fresh, citrusy, and fruity. And the fruits are pear. So there's pear in the top, and there's pear tree wood in the base. And, you know, outside of going to something like maybe Slumber House's Pear and Olive, or like one of those real niche fragrances that focuses on the note of pear, you probably won't find a better pear fragrance. I mean, that really focuses and is dedicated to the note of pear. This is probably one of the best pear, you know, dominant fragrances in my collection. Pear and pear tree wood. And then there's also basil, citrus notes, peach, rosemary, spices, cypress, pear tree wood, like I said earlier, and musk. And so it's a sort of a, you can see the color, the bottle coloring that they chose. Very clean, very crisp, very white, very fresh, very perfect for the weather we're having right now in July in Texas. You know, it's 90, 100 degrees every day. It feels like, you know, you can like taste the humidity in the air. The air is just heavy with humidity, and it's really dense, it's thick, it's, you know, that sort of weather. This is perfect for that, when it's just really, really hot and you want to wear something fresh and light and uplifting, but you still want to also wear something that is different, because very few people are wearing this nowadays. And for as good of a fragrance as this is, it just never really took off, I don't think, in sales. It never really caught on. So I think the new Dior Higher comes in a bottle that is, it has that cap on it, and it's the same bottle that they put the Modern Jewels in. But if you're looking for a fresh summertime fragrance that's sort of off the beaten path. Also, one thing I should mention is multiple people, I haven't smelled the new Dior, Dior Iveria, or whatever it's called. The one that Francis Kurkdjian made finally for the Privé Dior Privé collection. But that particular fragrance also has this sort of fruity pear thing going on, and I've heard more than one people actually compare it to Dior Higher, like a Privé version of Dior's Higher, with Francis Kurkdjian's sort of derivative white musk thing that he loves to do. So yeah, I mean, probably deserves better than to be number 7, but as far as my favorites to wear, this ranks number 7. So that just tells you everything in this list is quality. Okay, number 6 on the list. Number 6 is actually a fragrance that he did in 2005, and this one is discontinued. And it's from the house of Lanvin, and this is Arpege pour Homme. And if this looks like a Dior cap, that's because this fragrance is meant to be sort of a take on Dior Homme. This came out about 4 or 5, maybe 6 months after Dior Homme came out. And it takes that Iris for Men theme and plays off of it. And you can tell they even looked at the bottle, and whenever they were designing it, if you've I don't have my Dior Homme bottle with me. It's under lock and key, but if you've seen me show it on the channel before, you know, you've seen how the Dior Homme cap looks very similar to that. And so they were obviously going for what was popular at the time, you know, copying one of the big dogs, Dior. But they actually did a really, really good job with this. This is a great unsung designer fragrance if you like that style. If you're a Dior Homme fan, I really urge you to get your nose on Arpege pour Homme, because Olivier Pescheux did some things that are a little bit different here than in Dior Homme. And most importantly, there's a bitter orange note. You can tell he likes that bitter orange, because I said in Eros Flame he used that Chinotto note, which is sort of a special type of bitter orange. And now in Arpege pour Homme, there's a bitter orange in the top with neroli, mandarin orange, and pink pepper. And so the neroli here just adds a little bit of freshness to the composition in the top, so it doesn't just drag you down right into the sweetness, because there is a lot of vanilla and there's some designer sweetness in here, but I actually really like the way it's done here. This was 2005, so it was before stuff like this, you know, came out and sort of changed the sweet level that people are willing to tolerate in masculine fragrances. And you can really pick out the iris note in here. It's quality. There's some nutmeg, and nutmeg, for me, nutmeg works as a bow. You know, it just puts a bow on the ingredients, and it also acts as a referee. So it keeps all of the notes in bounds, so you don't get these notes shooting off, smelling like they shouldn't be somewhere, like they're out of bounds. You know, it keeps everything in bounds, in the field of play. There's a little bit of jasmine with that designer sort of tonka, vanilla, sandalwood, patchouli base, okay? But the vanilla, even though the vanilla is prominent here, it's not too sweet for me. I actually think this is a really good vanilla fragrance. I think this is a good take on a vanilla perfume. And of course, I mean, Lanvin's budget probably is much less than Dior's, or, you know, some of the best vanillas in the world are going to be stuff like Guerlain's. It's not going to compete with that. But if you like this style, especially that iris style, which really took off for men, everyone talks about Dior Homme or Dior Homme Parfum or Dior Homme Intense. Check this one out. This one might surprise you. And because there's very few people out there talking about Arpege pour Homme, I think you can still probably find bottles at a very respectable price. I think the great Anouge at Enchanté Perfumes might have some bottles still floating around. Okay, next on the list is going to be a flanker. So that was number 6. Number 5. Number 5 is a flanker of the great Azzaro pour Homme, and it is Azzaro pour Homme Intense. Now, this is the 2015 version of Azzaro pour Homme Intense. Most people don't realize there was actually a 1992 version of Azzaro pour Homme Intense as well that got discontinued. Thanks to Jonathan, I've got a couple drops of that juice, so I'll do a video on that. This is more of like a modernized take of Azzaro pour Homme. So it has that barbershop, you know, anise, lavender, and but basically what they did is they added this, added this liqueur note. And this liqueur note is a very popular note in 2015 to, let's say, 2020. That 5-year time frame where they were remaking all these old masculines. Feels like all they would do is take the fragrance and just make it liqueur, add this liqueur note to modernize it. That was the game plan, and it worked. You know, Cartier did it with Pasha de Cartier. They made a parfum version of that with sort of this liqueur note that's actually a really well done modern masculine. This is one that doesn't get much love. I think because Azzaro flankered the hell out of the Azzaro Pour Homme range. There's a million flankers, maybe even more, maybe a million's under giving them credit for how many they did. There's a million flankers. And some of them are really shit. And that's the thing about them, is that this is a really hit or miss range. Sometimes you'll smell one and you'll be like, wow, I can't believe that isn't even worth the $15 it's selling for at discounters. But then there are times like this, and I think this is actually a really good flanker, even though it is too sweet. There's no getting around that, the sweetness here can be a problem because it's got this ambery sort of modern, they say Venezuelan tonka bean, but it's got this modernized tonka sort of ambery, Laotian cinnamon sweetness. But underneath it all, if you wait, and this fragrance doesn't last forever. It only lasts like 5 or 6 hours, right? So you spray it on, and Olivier Pescheux, by the way, made this with the great Jacques Houclier, who did many of the Amen line. And so 2 really good perfumers, right? And so basically what you do is you spray this on, you wait a couple hours, and after a couple hours, after that sort of sweet, they're hoping to sort of tempt the modern masses to like this burns away. There's almost like this old school Azzaro Pour Homme vibe underneath. If you know the old bottles of Azzaro Pour Homme, if you like this style of fragrance, wait a little bit. It's lurking underneath. You have to be a little patient, but it is there. And it's really good. So for a modern flanker, got to give them props for this. I'll do a full review one day. But that is Azzaro Pour Homme Intense from 2015 at number 5. Number 4. Number 4 is a Davidoff fragrance. And it's actually a sort of, if Davidoff had a niche line, I guess this would sort of be it. And I actually really like this. I know Mark from the Robes 08 channel really likes this line as well, and I agree with him. These are really good. They were marketed by Coty. They come in these 100 ml bottles. I don't know if they were Middle Eastern exclusives or what, but I was able to find, if you can find these bottles for under $100, like I was able to find them for right around $100, that's a good deal. And so this one at number 4 is Davidoff's Amber Blend. And Amber Blend is a really good modernized, sort of spicy, woody amber fragrance that, interestingly enough, plays a very similar role to Azzaro Pour Homme Intense, but I like this much more. I think this is a much better fragrance than Azzaro Pour Homme Intense. This also has cinnamon and nutmeg, so it's got this oriental sort of warmth, this spiciness to it, with this amberiness, of course, to it. You can't call a fragrance Amber Blend and not have some amber in there. But they've sort of amped it up even further with resins like Peru Balsam, and they kept the liqueur note idea, though. This actually came out 1 year after Azzaro Pour Homme Intense, so I wonder how much of that liqueur sort of idea was floating around in his head still when he was creating Amber Blend. And so here they used rum absolute. They don't say what type of liquor they use here, just a liqueur note. But here they do say that it is specifically rum absolute with a pretty competently done sandalwood base. And as long as you're not ultra sensitive to amber woods, let's say, because there are some ambery woody materials in here to keep it going, but luckily they don't bother me. I mean, if you like things like Eau de Beau, right, by L'Occitane or something like that, I would say give this a sniff. It's some people compare it to Myrrh Imperial by Armani. I've never smelled that one, but I can tell you that as far as like designer ambers go, obviously if you sort of want to compare it to Serge Lutens, Ambre Sultan, or if you want to compare it to Andy Towers, L'air du désert marocain, or that kind of thing, you know, obviously this could fall a little bit flat, but for a designer like Davidoff to create something like this, actually really, really taken aback. This is one that really surprised me, and I really enjoy it. Perfect for the cold weather, this ambery sort of blend. There's a little bit of smokiness in here too, almost like there's a oud note, even though there isn't any oud in here. It almost feels like there is, you know, like there's a little bit of an oud accord, if you will. But yes, definitely check this one out. You may have to buy it on eBay or something if you're in the United States like I am. But that's a really good Davidoff designer. They haven't put new stuff out, I think, that interests people for a long time. Because for me, Davidoff is things like Zeno or the OG Davidoff from 1984, Davidoff. Other than that, I mean, there's very little for, I would say, the brand to keep people like me's interest, but Davidoff's Amber Blend is one of them. Okay, so that was number 4. Number 3. Number 3 is actually a Diptyque. So we're gonna have a Diptyque war here to finish it off, because there's a couple Diptyques here at the end. But the first one is actually the eau de parfum of a fragrance that Olivier Pescheux originally made for Diptyque as an EDT in 2011. He then remade it as an eau de parfum in 2018, and this is called 34 Boulevard Saint Germain, which is basically a homage, if you will, to the address of the Diptyque headquarters in France. And so here's the bottle. Very cool candle-like cap. And this is one of those Diptyques that I think the original that came out, the EDT, the you know, little atomizer that sucks up the juice looks like a candle wick. They made it look like a candle wick. And this is one of those fragrances that I think would smell awesome as a candle. And maybe it's just because Diptyque started out, you know, most brands actually started out with perfumes and then they went to candles. Diptyque sort of went the opposite way. First, they were a candle maker, then they got into perfume later on because of just the way the cookie crumbled. And so basically, I think in 61, they started selling sand candles. And then in 68, they decided to run a perfumery and launch their own fragrances under the Diptyque brand. And the name Diptyque, which I never actually knew this, but the name Diptyque, French for two-part, that's basically what Diptyque means. And it comes from the fact that the store windows were large diptyques, in that the windows were divided lengthwise into 2 parts. That's basically where the name Diptyque came from. And so they've always maintained this very conscious format of small store of like friends, you know, that's how they sell themselves, as like, hey, we're just a friend, come hang out with us kind of thing. But of course that all changed when Diptyque was bought by that equity fund, Manzanita Capital, which also bought Byredo recently. So, you know, these capital firms have really been on the hunt, especially with one recently buying Parfum de Marly and Initio as well. But that you can go check out. I did an entire video on that. So if you want to check that out, you can go check out my thoughts on Parfum de Marly and Initio being purchased. But this is actually a very simple, competently, just well done perfume. And my buddy Rich Mitch says he's famous for saying that for those folks who want to wear Aventus and, you know, get compliments, but maybe you want to wear something a little different, try this. You know, this is nothing like Aventus, but if you like wearing niche perfume because it's quality juice, this has this sort of woody, spicy, alluring smell to it. And it would smell great as a candle. It just absolutely would. There's no doubt about it. It's pink pepper, sandalwood, and vanilla. And for a designer, well, for a sandalwood accord where they're not out there using huge amounts of real sandalwood and stuff like that. However, this was made, pyrosantol, Javanol, whatever note Olivier Pescheux used and then blended together with the vanilla and the pink pepper. It's a beautiful, completely unisex fragrance, by the way. This would smell amazing on a woman. I think, actually, I might even prefer smelling this on a woman. This is, the smell is just so alluring, but it's not my favorite fragrance to wear as my scent of the day all the time. I really have to be in the mood. But, yes, 34 Boulevard Saint Germain is a fantastic fragrance and underrated in the Diptyque lineup. And beautiful bottle, too, by the way. So that's number 3. So number 2, we've got number 2 and number 1. So number 2 is the fragrance that Parfumo actually says is Olivier Pescheux's most popular creation that he's ever made. And it's this. It is Herod by Parfums de Marly. And Parfums de Marly is a house that I really don't like, or their sister house, Initio. I've made that very clear. But this is a fragrance that I liked from the get-go. And the reason that I liked it from the get-go is that I am a tobacco lover. I love tobacco fragrances. Tobacco is one of my favorite notes. And so this DNA, I just like this. Even though it's way too sweet for me, there's no getting around it. I should hate this fragrance because of how sweet it is. But Olivier Pescheux did a fantastic job with it. It's almost like this, you know, there's almost like this gourmand, edible aspect to this. And I know Parfums de Marly has made other fragrances that have this very similar base, but this is the one I think that really put them on the map. I know that Sebastian has always talked very highly about this fragrance, that this is the one that I think was his favorite of the whole Parfums de Marly line. And actually it says top 8 in unisex fragrance. So as far as unisex fragrances go, this is number 8, according to Parfumo. And I always thought this was a masculine fragrance. I had no clue this was marketed as unisex. That's news to me. I actually figured that out just recently. I was going back and watching some of Amy Loves Perfume's old videos. And this is a fragrance she really liked as well. And I came to find out they market this unisex. I thought this was a masculine release for the longest time, but it's cinnamon and a note in the top called pepperwood, which interestingly enough, it's a Givaudan fragrance ingredient that is said to have a woody, peppery odor profile. Go figure, right? No mysteries with that one, pepperwood. And it's actually a note that he used in Eros Flame as well. Pepperwood was used in Eros Flame. And so Herod has this pepperwood note in the top with tobacco, osmanthus, which I really do love osmanthus. It's one of my favorite florals. I love that suede-y, you know, apricot-y like feel that it gives with cistus and frankincense. Vanilla, cedarwood, musk, cypriol, patchouli, and vetiver is the base. And, you know, if I could take this release and just take the sweetness out, if you could just remove the sweetness, man, you would have one of the best tobacco fragrances, because it does have that sort of pepperiness, probably from the pepperwood ingredient, but that pepperiness, the cinnamony tobacco, labdanum resinous with the osmanthus, it's just that ultra sweet vanilla. And the cypriol adds a little bit of earthiness to tobacco. Tobacco can have that hay-like dry side anyways, but the cypriol adds a little bit of earthiness. But the vanilla is just extremely sweet. And so I grit my teeth, and I still wear this because I do enjoy it. But usually I'll save this for the cooler weather. But I do really like Herod. And it's actually his most popular fragrance according to Parfumo. And that leaves number 1. So this may surprise some folks because I have not talked about it too much on the channel, although I will review it. But I absolutely love this fragrance. I think it's, for a patchouli lover, I think it's almost one of those must sniffs. Nothing's a must buy, but it's a must sniff. And it is Tempo at number 1. And the reason Tempo is number 1, and if you look on there, you'll see kind of these, if you look at the marketing, you'll see almost like this psychedelic cat. There's an elephant right there. There's like some shrooms, some mushrooms lying around. There's like a snake coming up through the volcano. So it's like this hippy-dippy marketing campaign that really reminds you of the 1970s. And if you like patchouli fragrances from the 1970s, so, you know, if this is your example of a patchouli fragrance, and it's mine. I mean, this is my number one patchouli, hands down. Givenchy Gentleman in the vintage format from 1974. If this is your idea of patchouli, you have to smell Tempo. Tempo is like, you know, it's almost like, so it takes that old school Indonesian rough green harsh patchouli, right? That that slightly animalic old school unwashed patchouli feel of the past, and it says, here it is. I'm earthy. I'm you know, I'm green. I'm dark. I'm textured patchouli. You know, patchouli adds this scratchiness to a composition sometimes, and they said, okay, we're going to give you that vintage style, you know, patchouli, but we are going to slightly just, it's not going to be as rough and tumble as Givenchy's Gentleman or something like that, but we're going to add it, we're going to give it a little bit of this niche twist, if you will. So we added a little bit of violet leaf, which, to be honest, the patchouli violet leaf combination is stunning as far as I'm concerned. And because violet leaf has this sort of ozonic, sometimes gasoline quality, depending on how it's used here. Here, there is a slight gasoline quality. The patchouli comes off very woody, though, scratchy, harsh, you know, woody from the get-go. And then there's clary sage. And that can come across as also a little sweaty. Like, imagine it's in the 100 degrees and you're walking around out there and you're just sweating through your shirt and it's just hot and you're just reeking of vintage patchouli. And he blended it with this mate absolute note. And I did this is not a top 10 sort of tea video, but mate has its own sort of scent profile, but it just sort of adds this slight bit of comfort, this slight bit of, and of course the blending with the modern pink pepper and the bergamot and all of this stuff just makes it sort of a modernized hippy dippy patchouli, if that makes sense. And I think this is, for a patchouli lover, I think this is underrated to all get out. Not enough people talk about Tempo. In fact, I might wear this tomorrow in honor of Olivier Pescheux. I think I'm going to wear this tomorrow in honor of him, because this deserves more talk. I mean, it's probably way too much for the 100-degree heat in Texas, but I don't care. I wear whatever I want, basically, whenever I want. That's my motto. And working inside in the air conditioner anyways, even these type of scents are not, you know, it's not overkill. But this definitely deserves more love. It's my favorite Olivier Pescheux creation, because it doesn't have many of his creations, as you've noticed. The bookend ones are the exception to the rule. Dior Higher at number 7 and the number 1 spot are sort of the exception to the rule. Everything else he's done has a lot of sweetness in it in my collection, which there's a time and place for that, but you know, and the fresh fragrances don't really move me as much. This is the one in my collection that doesn't have that modernized sweetness. This is really him letting his hair down, being able to do something that truly is off the beaten path and unique. And I think this deserves much more love, Tempo, especially if you're a patchouli lover. So this is sort of a bittersweet video for me to do, because I had it on my list to rank his, you know, his fragrances in my collection anyways. It's just under very sad circumstances that we have to do that. I wish the best to his surviving spouse and children and family. You know, condolences from the bottom of my heart. I hope it's a little bit of a condolence to know that people like me will still cherish and get to continue to wear his creations, so he'll live on through these creations forever. But very, very sad video to do. And do let me know what your favorite Olivier Pescheux fragrances are. The other thing I should mention is that there's a lot of his fragrances that I have never smelled that some people absolutely love. So, like, for example, he's done some stuff for the Carolina Herrera line, which like the niche line of Carolina Herrera that I've never smelled. He's done stuff for other brands that friends have talked to me about that I've just never smelled. You know, he's done a lot. I was going to try to pull it up and see, but it's not pulling up now. But yeah, so his compositions, I still have a lot more of his work to discover. So this is just a very small cross section. But if there are others that he has made that that you love that we didn't talk about in the video, do leave it in the comments. So again, under very sad circumstances, but I hope you guys appreciated the video. Hope to see your faces in the comments. Cheers, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.